Hey, tonight we're going to talk about the time when finding enough food to keep your family alive meant getting creative in ways you can't imagine. Spoiler, it wasn't pleasant. You think your grocery store being out of your favorite cereal is bad. Let me tell you about the American Civil War and what people had to eat just to survive. If you're enjoying these bedtime stories about weird history, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Is it actually bedtime? Now, find a cozy spot, take a slow, deep breath and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the spring of 1863 in rural Virginia. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, your stomach is already cramping from hunger, and the rough straw mattress has left indentations on your skin that still sting when you move. The first thing you notice is the emptiness, not just the hollow feeling in your belly, though that's certainly there, but the emptiness of the pantry that was once filled with preserves, dried meats, and sacks of flour. Now, as you swing your legs over the edge of your bed, your feet touching the cold wooden floor, you're already thinking about what you might be able to scrounge up for breakfast. You walk to the window and look out at your small farm. The morning dew catches the first light of dawn, making the sparse garden gleam. Before the war, this land produced enough to feed your family and have plenty left over to sell. Now, with your husband and oldest son gone fighting for the Confederacy, you're left to manage everything yourself, with just your younger children to help. Your hands, once soft and unmarked, are now calloused and cracked from the constant work. You flex your fingers, feeling the ache in your joints. The spring chill seeps through your thin cotton nightgown, and you reach for the worn shawl hanging by your bed. The wool scratches against your neck, but you welcome the warmth. The clucking of the few remaining chickens reminds you that it's time to collect eggs, if there are any today. You slip your feet into boots that have been patched so many times they're more patch than original leather and head outside. The cool morning air fills your lungs as you cross the yard. Your stomach growls loudly, a constant companion these days. The chicken coop, once home to 20 healthy birds, now houses only 5 scrawny hens. You reach under a nesting hen and find a single small egg. It's not much, but it's something. Back in the kitchen, your 2 youngest children are already awake. 8-year-old Sarah is attempting to stoke the fire in the cook stove, while 6-year-old James sits at the table, his eyes following your every move, hoping you found something substantial for breakfast. Just 1 egg today, you say, trying to keep your voice light. But we still have some cornmeal left. Sarah looks up at you with those big brown eyes that remind you so much of her father. Are we having corn pone again? You nod, running your hand over her tangled hair. We're lucky to have corn, sweetheart. And it's true, many families you know are surviving on much less. The Union blockade has made everything scarce. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. Even here in Virginia, the breadbasket of the Confederacy, food has become precious. You take the small sack of cornmeal from the pantry. It feels lighter than yesterday. Carefully, you measure out just enough for breakfast, saving the rest for later. Before the war, you never had to be so precise with your ingredients, but now every grain counts. The cornmeal feels gritty between your fingers as you pour it into a bowl. You crack the single egg over it, watching as the yolk breaks and spreads, turning the dry meal slightly yellow. Next comes a splash of water, not milk, which is too valuable to use in cooking these days, and a tiny pinch of your dwindling salt supply. As you mix the ingredients together, your mind drifts to breakfasts before the war. Fluffy biscuits with butter and honey, fried ham, eggs for everyone. Your mouth waters at the memory and you push it away. Dwelling on what you no longer have only makes the hunger worse. The mixture comes together into a stiff dough. You form it into small patties, then place them in your cast iron skillet, which you've already set over the fire. The little bit of bacon grease you've saved from your last precious strip of meat helps prevent the corn pones from sticking. The smell that rises as the corn pones cook is plain but comforting. Your children's eyes never leave the skillet, and you notice James unconsciously licking his lips. The pones aren't much, just cornmeal, water, and a single egg to bind them, but they'll fill empty stomachs for at least a few hours. Once the corn pones are done, you divide them among the three of you. In the past, this would have been just a side dish alongside a hearty breakfast. Now, it's the whole meal. You watch as your children eat slowly, trying to make the food last. You do the same, savouring each bite, ignoring the fact that the corn pones are dry and bland. After breakfast, you send the children to tend the garden while you sit down to write a letter to your husband. You haven't heard from him in over a month, and worry gnaws at you constantly. In your letter, you don't mention the food shortages or how thin the children have become. Instead, you write about the garden, the chickens, the weather, normal things that might give him comfort on the battlefield. As you write, your mind wanders to coffee, or rather, the lack of it. Real coffee beans haven't been seen in your household for almost a year now. The Union blockade has made it nearly impossible for coffee to reach the South. Like most Confederate households, you've resorted to making coffee substitutes. You remember the first time you tried chicory root coffee, how bitter it was, how unlike the real thing, but over time you've grown accustomed to its taste. Necessity has a way of changing preferences. Rising from the table, you decide to prepare some of your coffee substitute. The children will soon be thirsty from their work in the garden, and the warm drink will provide comfort, if not much nutrition. You reach for the container where you keep your latest coffee alternative, roasted sweet potato pieces that you've dried and ground into a coarse powder. Making this substitute was a process you learned from a neighbour, peeling and cutting sweet potatoes into small chunks, drying them in the sun until they turned brown, then grinding them to the consistency of coffee grounds. The earthy smell fills the kitchen as you mix the grounds with hot water. It's not coffee, not really, but it's warm and familiar. Some people call it Lincoln coffee, with a sneer, blaming the Union president for the blockade that's forced these substitutions. But names don't matter when you're just trying to find comfort in a cup. Outside, you hear the children calling to each other as they work. Despite everything, they still find moments of joy, chasing butterflies between garden rows or making up games as they pull weeds. Their resilience amazes you. The garden is your lifeline now. Before the war, it was just a supplement to the goods you bought at the general store. Now, it's essential. You've expanded it twice already, digging up flower beds to plant potatoes and beans instead. Every inch of arable land has been given over to food production. Later in the morning, you hear the sound of wheels on the dirt road that leads to your farm. Visitors are rare these days, with everyone focused on their own survival. You wipe your hands on your apron and step outside to see Mrs. Parker, your nearest neighbour, driving her old wagon. "Morning," she calls, raising a hand in greeting. "Thought I'd stop by on my way back from town. Bring you some news and something to try." Mrs. Parker is older than you by 20 years, her face weathered by sun and hardship. She lost her husband before the war and has been managing alone ever since. If anyone knows how to survive on next to nothing, it's her. She climbs down from the wagon with surprising agility for a woman of her years and reaches into a sack beside her. "Got something new for coffee," she says, holding out a small cloth bundle. "Been trying different things since my chicory ran out." You take the bundle and open it to find what looks like dried dark brown chunks. "What is it?" you ask, unable to identify the contents. "Persimmon seeds," she says with a hint of pride. "Roasted them myself. They're not half bad once you get used to the taste. Better than that acorn mess my sister's been drinking." You thank her sincerely. Any new coffee substitute is a welcome addition to your limited options. You've tried so many already. Roasted corn, dried apples, even dandelion roots. Some were barely drinkable, others surprisingly decent, but none were coffee. "Come inside," you offer. "I've just made some sweet potato coffee. We can compare." Mrs. Parker follows you into the kitchen, her shrewd eyes taking in every detail of your home. You know she's assessing how you're faring, just as you would do in her house. It's not nosiness, it's concern. In these times, neighbours need to look out for each other. You pour her a cup of your sweet potato brew and set a small corn pone before her. It's proper to offer food to visitors, even when you have little to spare. She accepts both with a nod of thanks. "Heard from your William lately?" she asks, blowing on the hot drink. You shake your head. "Not for a month. Last letter said they were heading toward Pennsylvania." She nods thoughtfully. "Rumour in town is there might be a big fight up north soon. Union and Confederate armies both gathering." The worry that's always present in your chest tightens a little more. You push it down, focusing instead on the practical. "Any news about supplies coming through the blockade?" "Nothing good," she says with a sigh. "General stores got almost nothing left on the shelves. What they do have costs more than most can afford. $10 for a pound of coffee when you can find it, $30 for a barrel of flour. These prices are astronomical, impossible for most families to pay. Before the war, coffee had cost around 15 cents a pound, flour about $5 a barrel. The inflation caused by the war and blockade has put even basic necessities out of reach." "People are getting creative, though," Mrs. Parker continues, taking a sip of the sweet potato coffee. "This isn't bad, by the way. Better than the acorn coffee for sure. What else are folks trying?" you ask, always eager for new ideas. "Well, the Wilsons are making molasses from watermelon. Got the idea from someone who came up from Georgia. And just about everyone's preserving watermelon rinds now instead of throwing them out." Watermelon as a sweetener. It's not something you would have considered before, but with refined sugar now a rare luxury, any sweetness is precious. "And meat?" you ask, thinking of your dwindling supply of salt pork. Mrs. Parker's face grows more serious. "That's getting harder. Johnson's boy got a deer last week and half the town showed up hoping for a share. Folks are eating whatever they can trap or shoot. Squirrels, rabbits, even rats in the city, they say." Your stomach turns at the thought, but you know hunger can push people to extremes. You've heard stories from Richmond, the Confederate capital, just miles away, where the food situation is even worse than in the countryside. The army's taking a lot of what's produced, Mrs. Parker adds. Can't blame them. The boys fighting need to eat, but doesn't leave much for the rest of us. After Mrs. Parker leaves, promising to share any other substitution ideas she comes across, you decide to try her persimmon seed coffee. You roast the seeds a bit more in your skillet, then grind them using the back of a spoon against a wooden board, your coffee grinder having been packed away when real coffee became a memory. The resulting drink is dark and has a slight bitterness that's not entirely unpleasant, different from your sweet potato coffee, but a welcome change. You make a mental note to collect persimmon seeds when the fruit is in season again. The afternoon brings more work. Always more work. You check on the small patch of wheat you've managed to grow, hoping it will yield enough flour for occasional bread. The stalks are thin, nothing like the robust wheat fields you remember from before the war, but they're growing. Your hands feel rough against the delicate wheat stalks, skin hardened by constant work without the luxurious soaps and lotions that were once part of your daily routine. Another casualty of the blockade. Now you make soap yourself, using lye from wood ashes and whatever fats you can spare, which aren't many. As the sun begins to sink lower in the sky, your thoughts turn to dinner. The perpetual question, what can you make with almost nothing? Tonight, you decide on a stew of sorts, a few precious vegetables from the garden, a small piece of salt pork for flavour, and the last of your dried beans. The beans have been soaking since morning in water collected from yesterday's brief rain shower. The salt pork is not what you would have chosen in better times. It's heavily salted, the colour slightly off, the texture rubbery, but it will add flavour and a bit of substance to the stew. You cut it into tiny pieces, making it stretch as far as possible. The smell as it begins to cook is strong, too salty, slightly rancid, but your mouth waters anyway. Fat and salt are rare enough these days that even this questionable meat seems like a treasure. You add the soaked beans to the pot, along with a handful of wild onions the children gathered yesterday, and some small carrots from the garden. The carrots are stunted, nothing like the plump orange vegetables you used to grow, but they'll add colour and a touch of sweetness to the stew. As the stew simmers, filling the kitchen with its aroma, you take a moment to sit. Your back aches from bending over the garden all day, and your feet throb in your worn boots. You close your eyes, just for a moment, allowing yourself this small rest. The sound of the children coming back from checking the chicken coop pulls you from your brief respite. They burst into the kitchen, James excitedly holding up 2 more eggs. "Look, Mama, 2 more. That's 3 today." His excitement over such a small bounty breaks your heart and warms it at the same time. "That's wonderful," you say, taking the eggs carefully. "We'll save them for breakfast tomorrow." Sarah's eyes go to the pot bubbling on the stove. "Is that bean stew?" she asks, trying not to sound disappointed. Bean stew has become a frequent meal, and children, even hungry ones, tire of eating the same thing repeatedly. "It is," you confirm, "but it has salt pork today, and I thought we might try something new for dessert." Both children perk up at the mention of dessert, a rarity these days. "What is it?" James asks, eyes wide. "Mrs. Parker told me about making syrup from watermelon," you explain. "We have that small one that's been growing by the fence. I thought we might try it." The watermelon is indeed small, not the giant striped melons of peacetime summers, but it's ripe and represents a special treat. You've been saving it for a special occasion, and today, with the extra eggs and Mrs. Parker's visit bringing news and new ideas, seems as good a time as any to boost morale. After dinner, which the children eat with more enthusiasm than the simple bean stew perhaps deserves, you cut open the watermelon. The inside is pale pink, not the deep red you remember from better days, but the children's eyes light up anyway. You slice off a piece for each child, setting aside the rinds for preserving tomorrow. Then you take the remaining flesh and squeeze it through a piece of clean cloth into a pot. The juice is pale but sweet. "Now we'll cook it down to make syrup," you explain to the curious children, "just like we used to make maple syrup up north when I was a girl. The process is slow. The juice has to simmer until much of the water evaporates, leaving behind a thicker, sweeter liquid. As it cooks, the kitchen fills with a sweet, fresh scent that makes all of you inhale deeply, savouring this small pleasure. When the syrup has reduced enough, you let it cool slightly before allowing each child to dip a finger in for a taste. Their smiles at the sweetness make all the effort worthwhile. "Can we have some on our corn pone tomorrow?" Sarah asks hopefully. "We can," you agree, carefully transferring the precious syrup to a small jar. "Just a little though, we need to make it last." As the day draws to a close, you tuck the children into bed, their stomachs not full but at least not completely empty. The watermelon treat has put them in good spirits, and they fall asleep quickly, their small bodies worn out from the day's work. You sit by the window in the growing darkness, too tired to light a candle for just yourself. Outside, fireflies begin to appear, their gentle blinking a reminder that some beauty remains even in the hardest times. Your eyelids grow heavy as you think about tomorrow. More gardening, more searching for wild foods in the woods nearby, more careful rationing of every resource, but also the 3 eggs waiting for breakfast, the watermelon syrup for a touch of sweetness, the watermelon rinds to preserve. You've survived another day of this war that has taken so much from so many. Your hands resting in your lap tell the story of your adaptation, calloused, cracked, stained from soil and wild plants, nothing like the hands of the plantation mistress you once were. But they're strong hands now, capable hands that have learned to coax food from reluctant earth, to transform meagre ingredients into meals, to keep your children alive when so many are going hungry. As sleep begins to claim you, your last thoughts are of sweet potatoes and persimmon seeds, chicory and acorns, the unlikely ingredients that have replaced coffee in your life. Before the war, you would have turned up your nose at such substitutes. Now, you're grateful for every innovation, every new idea that helps you adapt to this strange new world of scarcity. Your breathing slows, your muscles relaxing one by one. Outside, the night creatures begin their symphony, a familiar lullaby that hasn't changed despite the war. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own hunger, but also perhaps its own small victories. For now, sleep offers escape from the constant worry, the perpetual calculations of how to stretch too little into enough. Your last conscious thought is of real coffee, its rich aroma and comforting warmth. Perhaps someday, when this war is finally over, you'll taste it again. The autumn chill seeps through your worn Confederate uniform as you huddle closer to the campfire. Your stomach growls so loudly that the soldier next to you glances over with a knowing look. It's been 3 days since your regiment received proper rations, and the hunger has become a constant companion, gnawing at you from the inside like some restless animal. You're a long way from your family farm in Georgia now. 9 months into your service with the Army of Northern Virginia, you've marched hundreds of miles, fought in 2 major battles, and learned more about hunger than you ever wanted to know. "Mails here," someone shouts from across the camp, and a ripple of excitement passes through the tired men. Letters from home are precious, but many soldiers hope even more fervently for packages containing food. Real food, not the meagre and often rancid rations distributed by the commissary when they manage to arrive at all. You rise stiffly, your joints protesting after sitting too long on the cold ground. The worn soles of your boots offer little protection as you walk across the frosted grass. Your toes feel numb, and you wiggle them with each step, trying to restore circulation. Your woolen uniform, patched in a dozen places and thin at the elbows, does little to keep out the bite of the evening air. "Jenkins," the mail carrier calls, and you step forward, surprised to hear your name. It's been weeks since you've received anything from home. The package he hands you is small but surprisingly heavy for its size. Your fingers, chapped and cracked from exposure to the elements, fumble with the twine as anticipation builds in your chest. Inside, wrapped carefully in cloth, you find a small jar of molasses, a bag of cornmeal, and a letter from your mother. The sight of these simple provisions brings a lump to your throat. You know what sacrifices were made to send them. Food is scarce everywhere in the South now, not just in the army. You tuck the precious items into your haversack and return to the fire. Your messmates, the 4 other soldiers you cook and eat with, eye your package with interest but remain respectfully distant. Food is personal in a way nothing else is out here. Got something good? Asks Thomas, the youngest of your group at barely 18. His hollow cheeks and sunken eyes speak of the same hunger that plagues you all. Cornmeal and molasses, you reply, already planning how to stretch these ingredients to share among your messmates. Out here, food is communal, even when it's sent from home. We'll eat better tonight than we have in a week. The others try not to look too eager, but you see the hope flickering in their tired eyes. William, the oldest at 42, already reaches for the battered skillet that travels with your mess. He's become the unofficial cook of your little group, having spent years as a farmhand before the war and learned to make something edible out of almost nothing. Could make some kush, he suggests, referring to the dish that's become a staple in Confederate camps, a mixture of crumbled cornbread fried with whatever fat is available. Got a bit of salt pork left. Your mouth waters at the thought. Salt pork, like everything else, has been in short supply lately. The piece William refers to is small, the meat so heavily salted it hardly resembles food anymore, but it will add flavour and precious fat to the cornmeal. While William prepares to cook, you settle back by the fire and open your mother's letter. Her handwriting is familiar and comforting, though you notice it's shakier than before. The paper is poor quality, another sign of the blockade's effect on everyday life in the South. The letter details life at home, the garden they've expanded to grow more vegetables, the chicken that stopped laying eggs, the new coffee substitute your sister has concocted from parched corn and dried sweet potatoes. Reading between the lines, you understand things are hard, maybe harder than she's letting on. Still, she sent what food she could spare, and the knowledge fills you with both gratitude and guilt. Near the fire, William has started preparing your meal. The smell of salt pork frying draws other soldiers closer, their own dinners already consumed or non-existent. You fold your letter carefully and tuck it into your breast pocket, close to your heart, before joining the others. The salt pork sizzles in the skillet, rendering its precious fat. The smell is strong, the meat is far from fresh, but to your hungry senses it's ambrosial. William adds a small amount of water to the pan, then crumbles in some stale cornbread saved from yesterday. As the mixture cooks, it forms a thick porridge-like substance, kush the Confederate soldiers stand by when rations are short. When he adds a spoonful of your mother's molasses to the mixture, a ripple of appreciation goes through the group. Sweetness is a rarity these days. Even the harsh black-strap molasses tastes like a delicacy to men who've been living on salt meat and dry cornbread for months. Reckon this is what they're eating in Richmond these days, jokes James, the 4th member of your mess. Jefferson Davis himself probably ain't eating this fine tonight. The humour is weak but welcome. Anything to distract from the reality of your situation, an army on the move, supply lines stretched thin, and winter approaching with insufficient clothing, shelter, and food. When the kush is done, William divides it carefully among the 5 of you. The portions are small, but the addition of molasses transforms the usual bland dish into something special. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, letting the warmth spread through your cold body. My ma used to make something like this, says Thomas between bites. Called it slosh, though. More grease, less cornbread. Different name, same idea, William replies. Bread and fat to fill an empty stomach. Been making it since I was a boy, though we called it skilly back home. As you eat, you remember your first exposure to army food, how shocked you'd been at the poor quality and limited variety. Before the war, you ate fresh vegetables from the garden, meat from your own livestock, bread baked daily in your mother's kitchen. The transition to military rations had been harsh. Salt pork or beef so heavily preserved it had to be soaked overnight to be edible. Cornbread that grew mouldy in damp weather. Coffee that wasn't coffee at all but a poor substitute made from whatever was available. You'd heard stories about the Union soldiers and their hardtack, a rock-hard biscuit made from flour, water and salt. Occasionally, when your regiment captured Union supplies, you'd had the chance to try these infamous crackers. They were nearly indestructible, often infested with weevils, and required soaking in coffee or soup to be chewable. Still, many Confederate soldiers considered them a welcome change from the monotony of cornbread. The memory of your last encounter with hardtack brings a smile to your face. During a skirmish 3 weeks ago, your company had overtaken a small Union camp and captured their supplies. You'd found a box of hardtack and traded some to a fellow soldier for his tobacco ration, considering it a good bargain to have both variety in your diet and something to trade with the Union pickets for coffee. Your thoughts are interrupted by a commotion at the edge of camp. A group of soldiers has returned from a foraging expedition carrying what looks like a wild turkey and several rabbits. A ripple of excitement passes through the camp. Fresh meat is a luxury rarely seen these days. "Jenkins!" calls Sergeant Miller, striding toward your fire. "You're on cooking detail tomorrow. Captain wants something special made with that game. Says it's the Colonel's birthday." You nod, accepting the assignment without complaint. Cooking for officers means extra work, but also the chance of leftovers and perhaps a small reward. Besides, you've developed a reputation as one of the more inventive cooks in the company, able to transform meagre ingredients into something resembling a decent meal. "What are you thinking?" William asks after the sergeant leaves. "Stew?" You consider the options. Stew would stretch it furthest, but the officers might expect something finer, maybe a roast turkey with whatever greens we can forage and rabbit stew on the side. Planning the meal reminds you of hunting trips before the war, when bringing home game meant celebration, not survival. Now, every squirrel, rabbit or bird shot by a soldier represents precious protein for men subsisting largely on cornbread and whatever vegetables can be foraged or stolen from nearby farms. The fire crackles and pops as it burns down to embers. Around you, other campfires dot the landscape, each surrounded by small groups of men talking quietly, writing letters, or simply staring into the flames. The sounds of an army camp at night, coughing, snoring, occasional laughter, the distant neighing of horses create a familiar backdrop to your thoughts. After finishing your portion of kush, you lean back, feeling the pleasant weight of food in your stomach. It won't last long, you'll be hungry again by morning, but for now, the worst edge of hunger has been blunted. "Anyone for coffee?" asks James, holding up a small pouch. "Real coffee, not that chicory nonsense." This catches everyone's attention. Real coffee is rarer than gold in the Confederate Army. The Union blockade has made importing it nearly impossible, and what little gets through typically goes to officers or hospitals. "Where'd you get that?" Thomas asks, eyes wide with disbelief. James grins, revealing a gap where he lost a tooth at Antietam. "Traded with a Union picket last night. Gave him some tobacco and a bit of that fancy writing paper my sister sent." No one questions the ethics of trading with the enemy. It's a common practice among pickets on both sides. Small human connections in the midst of war. Coffee flows south, tobacco flows north, and for brief moments, soldiers remember their shared humanity. James brews the coffee in a battered tin cup, the aroma drawing appreciative sniffs from everyone nearby. When he passes the cup around, each man takes only a small sip, extending the rare treat as long as possible. The bitter liquid feels like a luxury on your tongue, and the familiar taste brings memories of home, of peaceful mornings before the war tore the country apart. As night deepens, you prepare for sleep. Your bedroll is thin and patched, offering minimal protection from the cold ground, but you've learned to be grateful for what you have. Some men have no blankets at all, having lost them during marches or battles. You lie back, using your haversack as a pillow, the remaining cornmeal and molasses safely tucked inside for tomorrow. Above you, stars pierce the clear autumn sky, cold and distant. The same stars shine over your family in Georgia, over the Union camps not 10 miles away, over a country divided against itself. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by the cold and the persistent ache of hunger that even tonight's meal couldn't fully satisfy. You dream of your mother's kitchen, of corn pudding and fresh bread, of coffee that doesn't need to be traded for in secret. Morning arrives with frost coating your blanket and beard. Your joints ache as you rise, stomach already growling despite last night's relatively substantial meal. The camp comes alive around you, men coughing, cursing the cold, stoking fires back to life. Today's official ration, when distributed, proves to be minimal. A small portion of cornmeal, a piece of salt pork barely bigger than your thumb, and a handful of rice. The commissary sergeant looks apologetic, but offers no explanation. Everyone knows the situation. Supply wagons delayed, perhaps captured by Union cavalry, or simply empty because there's nothing left to distribute. Your assignment to cook for the officers takes on new significance with these meagre rations. The wild game brought in yesterday represents a rare opportunity for a decent meal, and you're determined to make the most of it. With help from William and Thomas, you begin preparing the turkey. The bird is skinny, nothing like the plump domestic turkeys raised on farms, but it's fresh meat, a luxury beyond compare in these circumstances. You clean it carefully, saving even the innards for gravy or stuffing. "What about vegetables?" Thomas asks as you work. "Can't have a proper meal without something green." You nod toward the woods that border the camp. "Thought we'd do some foraging. There should be wild onions out there, maybe some late greens. I saw some persimmon trees yesterday too. Might be ripe enough to eat." Foraging has become second nature to most soldiers. Before the war, you knew little about wild foods, but necessity has made you observant. Now you can identify edible plants that would have gone unnoticed before. Wild onions with their distinctive smell, dandelion greens, bitter but nutritious, sassafras, roots for tea, persimmons, sweet when ripe but mouth-puckeringly astringent when not. You send Thomas and James to forage while you and William continue preparing the turkey. The bird is spitted on a green branch, ready to roast over the fire. The rabbits are cut into pieces for a stew, supplemented with a few precious potatoes traded from another company. "Remember that dish the captain liked last month?" William asks as he works. "The one with rice and that red stuff?" You nod, recalling the meal. "Tomato paste from that sutler's wagon we found. Called it Spanish rice, though I doubt any Spaniard would recognize it." Improvisation defines army cooking. You've become adept at creating dishes from whatever ingredients are available, giving them grand names to elevate simple concoctions. Hardtack crushed and fried in bacon grease becomes breakfast hash. Salt pork boiled with rice transforms into Carolina dinner. A few wild greens added to cornbread batter produces spring bread. By midday, Thomas and James return from their foraging expedition with a bounty better than expected. Wild onions, some late pokeweed, which needs careful cooking to remove its poison, a handful of chestnuts, and surprisingly, a small bag of apples acquired through means they refuse to specify. "Don't ask," James says with a wink. "Let's just say a farmer near here won't miss a few apples from his cellar." You don't press the issue. Foraging often blurs into stealing, but hunger makes morality flexible. Besides, armies on both sides have been stripping the countryside as they pass through. At least your men took only apples, not the farmer's last cow or seed corn. The unexpected apples transform your cooking plans. Instead of plain roast turkey, you can now make a stuffing with cornbread, apples, and chestnuts. The rabbits will stew with wild onions and the few potatoes, and there might even be enough apples left for a simple dessert, sliced and fried with a bit of precious sugar saved from previous rations. As you cook, other soldiers drift by, drawn by smells that are rare in camp. You try not to notice their hungry looks. Everyone understands that this meal is for the officers, even if it seems unfair that some eat well while others subsist on meagre rations. By late afternoon, the meal is ready for delivery to the officers' tents. The roast turkey, though smaller than peacetime birds, looks impressive with its crisp skin. The rabbit stew has thickened nicely, the meat tender after hours of slow cooking. Apple slices fried in pork fat and sprinkled with sugar complete the meal, a feast by army standards. Captain Reynolds nods approvingly when you deliver the food. "Fine work, Jenkins. Wait around. There might be something left to take back to your mess." This is what you hoped for. Officers rarely finish everything, and the leftovers will supplement your mess's meagre rations tonight. While waiting, you sit outside the officer's tent, resting your tired feet. The smell of the food you can't yet eat makes your stomach cramp with hunger, but you've grown accustomed to this feeling. 9 months of army life have taught you to ignore discomfort that once would have seemed unbearable. Your thoughts drift to the coming winter. Already the nights are cold enough to make sleep difficult. What will it be like in December, January? The Confederate government has promised winter uniforms, but promises mean little when manufacturing and transportation are crippled by blockade and war. Food will become even scarcer as winter progresses. Already the army is on reduced rations, with full issues becoming the exception rather than the rule. Foraging yields less as the land goes dormant. Game becomes harder to find. Even salt, essential for preserving meat, is in short supply after the loss of key salt works to Union forces. Your reverie is interrupted when the captain's orderly emerges from the tent with a tin plate holding turkey bones, leftover stew, and half the fried apples. "Captain says thanks," the orderly tells you. "Colonel was mighty pleased." You accept the plate with genuine gratitude. Even leftovers represent a bounty compared to normal rations. Your messmates will celebrate tonight. Walking back through camp, you protect the plate carefully. Food is currency here, more valuable than money. Confederate dollars have become nearly worthless due to inflation, but a piece of salt pork or a cup of real coffee can obtain almost anything a soldier might want to trade. At your campfire, your messmates await eagerly. Their faces light up at the sight of the leftovers. More food than any of them expected. "Officers must have been in a generous mood," William remarks as you divide the food. Thomas nods toward another group of soldiers huddled around a meagre fire. "What about them? Philip's mess got nothing today. Their rations were stolen while they were on picket duty." You hesitate, looking at the food divided among your plates. It's not much split 4 ways, and would be even less split 7 or 8 ways. But Thomas is right. You can't eat while knowing others have nothing. Invite them over, you decide. We'll make it stretch, and somehow you do. The turkey bones go into a pot with the last of your cornmeal to make a thin porridge. The rabbit stew, mostly broth now with few pieces of meat, still provides flavour. The fried apples are cut into smaller pieces, ensuring everyone gets a taste of sweetness. It's not enough to satisfy hunger, but it's something. The men from Philip's mess express their thanks quietly, with nods and mumbled words. They'll do the same for your group someday. That's how survival works out here. As darkness falls, conversation turns to food, as it often does among hungry men. Each soldier contributes memories of favourite meals from home, or fantasies of what they'll eat when the war ends. "My mother's sweet potato pie," sighs Thomas, "with cinnamon and enough sugar to make your teeth ache. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven with butter melting into it," adds James, closing his eyes as if he can taste it. William, older and more practical, shakes his head. "I'd settle for a good steak and potatoes. Nothing fancy, just plenty of it." Your own contribution is simple. Coffee, real coffee, a whole pot of it, not chicory or burnt corn or whatever we're calling coffee these days. This draws knowing laughs. The Confederate coffee substitutes have become a running joke. Acorns, chicory, dandelion roots, sweet potatoes, peanuts, corn, rye, okra seeds. Anything that can be roasted dark and ground to resemble coffee beans has been tried with varying degrees of awfulness. "Remember that time Simmons tried making coffee from burnt bread?" James laughs. "Tasted like drinking the ashes from the bottom of the fire pit." "Still better than Johnston's acorn coffee," you counter. "That stuff was so bitter it made your eyes water." These shared complaints and memories create a bond stronger than any military discipline could forge. You've marched together, fought together, gone hungry together. Food, or the lack of it, is the constant thread in your shared experience of war. As the evening grows later, you pull out your most prized possession, a battered tin harmonica saved from a battlefield months ago. The music provides comfort, a reminder of humanity in the midst of hardship. You play softly, old songs that everyone knows, and some of the men sing along in low voices. The cold seems less biting when filled with music, the hunger less urgent. For a little while, you're not just soldiers, but men with histories and futures, with favourite foods and songs, with families waiting for them somewhere. Later, as you prepare for another night on the hard ground, you consider tomorrow's challenges. Official rations will likely be meagre again. The officers won't need special meals without an occasion to celebrate. It will be back to the daily struggle to find enough to eat. But you have options, strategies developed over months of scarcity. There's fishing in the nearby stream. Though cold weather makes the fish sluggish and harder to catch, there are still areas nearby that haven't been completely foraged, and there's always the possibility of trading. Tobacco from home for Union coffee, skill at mending for a share of someone else's rations. You've become resourceful in ways you never imagined before the war. The boy who left Georgia 9 months ago wouldn't recognise the man you are now. Leaner, harder, intimately familiar with hunger, capable of making meals from ingredients that once would have seemed inedible. As sleep approaches, your body relaxes muscle by muscle. The ground feels less hard as exhaustion takes over. Your last thoughts before drifting off are not of battle or glory, but of simple things. Warm bread, hot coffee, a full stomach. In war, you've learned the greatest luxury is not gold or finery, but enough to eat and a safe place to sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own hunger, but tonight, with the leftover taste of fried apples still on your tongue and the warmth of shared food and music in your heart, seems almost bearable, almost like peace. The good news is you're a Union soldier with access to more reliable rations than your Confederate counterparts. The bad news? Those rations are still barely edible most days, and you've been staring at the same hard biscuit for nearly 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage to attempt eating it. The morning mist hangs low over the Union camp near Chattanooga as you sit on an overturned barrel outside your tent. Your blue uniform is damp from the previous night's rain, adding a chill that seems to seep directly into your bones. You flex your fingers, trying to restore feeling to them before attempting to tackle your breakfast again. The hardtack in your hand, a simple cracker made of flour, water and salt, is so solid it could probably stop a bullet. In fact, you've heard stories of soldiers finding bullet holes in their hardtack after battles, the dense biscuit apparently having caught stray shots without breaking apart. Some men jokingly refer to these crackers as sheet iron or tooth dullers. You've personally started calling them worm castles after discovering the tiny inhabitants that often take up residence in the dense flour. Your stomach growls impatiently, reminding you that despite its unappetizing nature, this hardtack represents necessary sustenance. 9 months into your service with the Army of the Cumberland, you've learned not to be too particular about what you eat. Still, there are ways to make even the most basic rations more palatable. You reach for your battered tin cup and pour in a measure of the dark coffee you brewed earlier. The Union Army ensures a steady supply of coffee beans, one luxury that remains consistent even when other rations grow scarce. The rich aroma rises with the steam, momentarily masking the less pleasant smells of the camp. Unwashed bodies, wet wool, mud, and the ever-present scent of wood smoke. Dunking the hardtack into the hot coffee, you count silently to 30, giving the liquid time to soften the rock-hard biscuit. This is the simplest way to make hardtack edible, though not the most appetizing. As the coffee seeps into the dense flour, you watch carefully for any small white worms that might emerge, floating to the surface as they escape their drowning home. It's a common enough sight that you no longer find it particularly disgusting, simply part of army life. You fish out 2 tiny worms, flick them onto the ground, and continue the soaking process. Around you, the camp is coming alive. Thousands of men performing the same morning rituals, stoking fires, brewing coffee, preparing whatever food is available. Some are fortunate enough to have received packages from home containing luxuries like canned fruits or homemade cookies. Others, like you, make do with standard army issue. Fancy breakfast today, eh, Thompson? Calls your tent mate Riley as he emerges, his red hair sticking up at odd angles, his freckled face still creased with sleep lines. Only the finest, you reply, finally deeming the hardtack soft enough to attempt. You take a bite, the soggy texture unpleasant but far better than breaking a tooth on its unsoaked form. It tastes primarily of coffee now, the bland flour backdrop hardly noticeable. Want some? I've got 3 more. Riley yawns and stretches his lanky frame. Saving mine for something special. Daniels from Company B is making skillygalee for lunch. Your interest piques at this. Skillygalee, hardtack pounded into a powder, mixed with water or broth and fried in pork fat, represents a significant improvement over plain soaked hardtack. The crushed biscuit absorbs flavours better, and the frying creates a crisp exterior that almost makes you forget you're eating army rations. Where'd he get the pork fat, you ask, knowing that the salt pork issued by the commissary department is often so rancid it's nearly inedible without extensive soaking and boiling. Riley grins, revealing a chipped front tooth from a brawl 3 months back. Package from home, his mother sent salt pork that wasn't grown in a laboratory apparently, said we could all contribute hardtack if we want in on it. This is how soldiers survive, pooling resources, sharing packages from home, combining skills and ingredients to transform meager rations into something that at least resembles real food. Your own package from home is 2 weeks overdue, likely delayed by the same rail disruptions that occasionally leave the army itself short-supplied. After finishing your coffee-soaked hardtack, you begin preparations for the day. Your company isn't on drill or patrol duty until afternoon, leaving the morning free for camp chores. You need to wash your spare shirt, check your rifle for rust after yesterday's rain, and most pressing, find something more substantial to contribute to the lunchtime skilly-gaily than just your hardtack ration. The sutler's wagon arrived yesterday, and while the prices are highway robbery, sometimes spending your meagre pay on a few luxuries is worth it for morale. You grab your nearly empty wallet and head toward the edge of camp where civilian merchants set up their mobile stores. The muddy path squelches beneath your boots as you walk, the leather still damp enough that you can feel moisture seeping through to your socks. Around you, the vast Union encampment stretches in orderly rows, thousands of white canvas tents housing men from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a dozen other northern states. Cook fires send thin columns of smoke into the grey sky, and the sounds of an army at rest, men talking, laughing, occasionally arguing, axes chopping wood, horses nickering, create a familiar backdrop. Your muscles ache slightly from yesterday's marching drill, but it's a good ache, the kind that reminds you you're strong and capable. 9 months of army life have hardened your once soft hands into calloused tools and transformed your formerly desk-bound body into something leaner and more resilient. Hunger is a familiar companion now, even when rations are regularly distributed. Army portions never quite satisfy the appetite built by long marches and physical labour. The sutler's wagon comes into view, already surrounded by soldiers looking to supplement their rations. Jacob Meyer, a rotund man with a perpetually sweaty face, watches the crowd with calculating eyes. Sutlers know they can charge exorbitant prices when they're the only source of certain goods, and Meyer is particularly adept at extracting maximum profit. You join the queue, scanning the goods displayed on makeshift shelves along the wagon's side. Canned goods, peaches, condensed milk, sardines occupy prime positions, their tin surfaces catching what little sunlight filters through the clouds. Small bags of sugar and coffee sit nearby, alongside tobacco, writing paper, and other essentials not provided by the army. At the far end, Meyer's assistant sells small bottles of whiskey at prices that would make a city bartender blush. When your turn comes, you consider your options carefully. Your pay is nearly gone until the next distribution, which could be delayed like so many others. Still, the thought of enhancing the skilly-gally with something special is tempting. Tin of condensed milk, you finally decide, pointing to the Borden's Eagle brand that's become popular among soldiers looking to improve coffee or hardtack, and a small bag of dried apples. Meyer names a price that makes you wince, but you pay without complaint. The condensed milk will transform ordinary skilly-gaily into what soldiers call milk-a-toast, a sweet, rich dish that almost resembles a dessert when prepared properly. The dried apples will add flavour and nutrition to a diet severely lacking in fresh fruit. With your purchases secured in your haversack, you head back toward your company's area. Along the way, you pass the camp kitchen where the company cooks are preparing what passes for the midday meal. Today it appears to be bean soup, the large cauldron steaming over a well-established fire. One cook stirs the pot while another opens a small tin of what you recognize as desiccated vegetables. These compressed vegetable cakes, a combination of dried carrots, turnips, parsnips, cabbage and onions, are a standard army issue meant to prevent scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies. Most soldiers refer to them as desecrated vegetables, a testament to their flavour and texture. When rehydrated in boiling water, they turn into a formless, often bitter mush that bears little resemblance to fresh produce. You've heard that the Union Army contracted with food processors to create these veggie bricks specifically for soldier rations. The idea was sound, providing necessary vitamins in a form that wouldn't spoil during transportation and storage. The execution, however, left much to be desired. Still, you've seen enough cases of scurvy among men who trade away or discard their vegetable ration to appreciate the importance of choking down the unappetizing mush. Back at your tent, Riley has managed to acquire a small onion from somewhere, you don't ask questions, and is dicing it with his pocket knife. For the skilly-gaily, he explains, thought it could use some flavour beyond pork fat and hardtack. You display your own contributions, the condensed milk and dried apples. Riley's eyes widen appreciatively. Well, Thompson's gone fancy on us, he says with a grin. Milk toast it is then? Daniels will be pleased. The morning passes with mundane tasks. You clean your rifle meticulously, oil the metal parts to prevent rust, and check your ammunition supply. The rhythmic process is soothing, allowing your mind to wander home to Minnesota, to the small farm where your parents and younger siblings continue life without you. Letters from home mention increasing food prices, though nothing like the severe shortages facing southern civilians under blockade. By noon, a small crowd has gathered near Daniel's cooking fire. The skilly-gaily preparation has become something of an event, drawing soldiers from your company eager for a taste of something better than standard rations. Daniels, a former cook's apprentice before the war, has already begun the process. Hardtack from 6 different soldiers has been crushed to a coarse powder using the butt of a rifle and a canvas bag. The fragments are soaking in water to soften, while a generous portion of salt pork sizzles in a cast-iron skillet. That doesn't smell like army issue, you comment, noting the relatively fresh aroma of the pork fat rendering in the pan. Mother's best, Daniels confirms, a note of pride in his voice. Farm-raised, not that chemical-soaked stuff they give us, makes all the difference. Once enough fat has rendered, Daniels adds the soaked hardtack crumbs to the skillet. The mixture sizzles satisfyingly, the bland flour beginning to absorb the rich pork flavour. Riley contributes his diced onion, which immediately fills the air with a sweet, sharp aroma that makes your mouth water. Thompson's brought the finishing touch, Riley announces, nodding toward your haversack. You produce the condensed milk to murmurs of appreciation. In the army, such simple luxuries take on outsized importance. The sweet, thick milk is as valuable as gold when it comes to transforming military rations into something resembling home cooking. Daniels continues cooking, stirring the mixture until it forms a golden crust on the bottom. Then he adds a small amount of condensed milk, which sizzles as it hits the hot pan, creating a caramelized sweetness that smells nearly divine after weeks of plain salt pork and hardtack. The final dish is divided among the contributors, each man receiving a portion on his tin plate. It's not large, nothing in the army ever provides complete satisfaction, but the quality compensates for quantity. The skilly-gaily, elevated to milk toast with the addition of condensed milk, has a crispy exterior giving way to a soft interior, sweet and savoury at once. The onion provides sharp bursts of flavour, and the pork fat gives richness that army rations typically lack. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, letting the warm food settle in your perpetually hungry stomach. Around you, the other soldiers do the same, conversation momentarily halted by the simple pleasure of decent food. Almost makes you forget we're at war, Riley comments between bites. Almost, but not quite. Even this moment of culinary satisfaction exists within the larger context of conflict. The blue uniform you wear, now stained with grease from the skilligalee, remains a reminder of your purpose here. The distant sound of artillery practice from the edge of camp provides a percussion backdrop to your meal. After lunch, your company assembles for afternoon patrol duty. Your sergeant, a weathered man named Gardner, who fought at Shiloh and Stones River, gives brief instructions before leading you out of camp and into the surrounding countryside. The patrol route takes you through farmland that has already been picked clean by earlier Union foragers. Fields that should be full of corn or wheat lie fallow or show signs of hasty harvest. Farmhouses stand silent, many abandoned as Southern civilians fled the approaching Northern Army. Gardner signals a halt when you reach a small creek around mid-afternoon. 10 minutes, he announces. Fill canteens. While others move to the creek, you notice apple trees in an overgrown orchard beyond the water. Most have been stripped of fruit, but one tree at the far edge appears to have been overlooked without asking permission, foraging being an unofficial but accepted practice. You wade across the shallow creek and make your way toward the tree. The apples are small and tart, not yet fully ripe, but they represent fresh food, something your diet has sorely lacked. You fill your cap with as many as it will hold, already imagining how they might be sliced and fried with a bit of sugar from your rations, or perhaps added to tomorrow's hardtack porridge. As you turn to head back to the patrol, movement near the abandoned farmhouse catches your eye. A thin figure darts between outbuildings, too small to be a man, perhaps a child or young woman. Your first instinct is caution. Confederate guerrillas sometimes use civilian as bait for ambushes, but something about the furtive movement speaks of fear rather than threat. You hesitate, then call out, "I won't hurt you. Are you hungry?" No response comes, but the movement stops. You sense you're being watched from the shadows of a small shed. "I have apples," you continue, holding one up. "You can have some." After a long moment, a girl of perhaps 12 emerges cautiously. Her dress is worn but clean, her face thin with hunger, but still holding the stubborn pride you've come to recognize in Southern civilians. She eyes you warily, gaze fixed on your blue uniform with undisguised hostility. "These are our apples anyway," she says, her voice carrying a heavy Tennessee accent. "You Yankees taking everything else wasn't enough?" Her words sting with truth you can't deny. Union armies have indeed stripped much of the countryside to supply themselves, following the ancient military doctrine that armies should live off the land they occupy. General Sherman has made this an explicit policy. War should be felt by civilians to break Southern resolve, and that includes the pain of hunger. "I'm sorry," you say, and mean it. War has many victims, and hungry children rank among the most innocent. Here, you hold out your cap full of apples. She approaches cautiously, like a wild animal expecting a trap. When she reaches you, she grabs a handful of apples quickly, then backs away. "My brother's sick," she says after a moment. "Mama's making him apple tea, supposed to help the fever." You've never heard of apple tea for fever, but folk remedies differ from region to region. In Minnesota, your mother would have used willow bark tea or perhaps a mustard plaster. "Take more," you offer, extending the cap again. "For your brother." She hesitates, pride warring with necessity. Necessity wins, as it usually does where food is concerned in wartime. She takes the remaining apples, cradling them in the skirt of her dress. "Yankees killed our cow," she says, the accusation plain in her voice. "Pa's fighting with General Johnston. Been eating nothing but cornbread and whatever we can grow since Christmas. You have no defense to offer. Instead, you reach into your haversack and pull out the small bag of dried apples purchased from the sutler. It's an impulsive gesture, one you might regret later when your own hunger gnaws at you, but you can't stand before this child and keep food she needs more than you do. "These too," you say, "they're already dried, will last longer." Surprise replaces hostility in her expression. She accepts the dried apples with a nod that stops short of thanks, but acknowledges the gesture. "Your ma know you're out here alone?" you ask, suddenly aware of how vulnerable a young girl might be with armies moving through the area. "She sent me to check the trees. Didn't know Yankees would be here." A hint of defiance returns to her voice. "We ain't afraid of you." "You should get back," you advise, hearing the sergeant's whistle signalling the end of the break. "More soldiers coming through soon." She needs no further prompting, disappearing back toward the farmhouse with her precious cargo of apples. You cross the creek again, returning to your patrol with only 2 apples saved for yourself. A poor return on your foraging expedition, but the hollow feeling in your stomach is offset by the knowledge of having done something right in the midst of so much wrong. Sergeant Gardner gives you a knowing look when you rejoin the group, but says nothing. He's a fair man who enforces military discipline while understanding the human realities of soldiers and civilians caught in war's machinery. The patrol continues until dusk, finding no sign of Confederate forces in the area. By the time you return to camp, your feet ache from miles of walking and your stomach growls insistently. The 2 apples you kept have long since been eaten, their brief sweetness faded to memory. Evening rations are distributed as you return. Salt pork, hardtack, and coffee as usual, with the addition of rice and a small portion of sugar. It's a better issue than some days, though the salt pork smells slightly off, requiring extended soaking to remove excess salt and any rancidity. You collect your portion and join Riley and 3 other tent mates at your communal fire. Each man contributes to the evening meal, pooling resources to create something more satisfying than individual rations would allow. One has saved salt pork from the previous day's issue. Another has a small amount of molasses obtained through trade with another company. Riley still has a few onions, a mystery you continue not to question. Together, you create a meal that would horrify civilian diners but represents luxury in army terms. Rice cooked with diced salt pork and onions, sweetened slightly with molasses and sugar, with hardtack crumbled on top for texture. It's hot, filling, and varies the flavors enough to provide satisfaction beyond mere sustenance. Conversation flows easily around the fire as you eat. These men have become a surrogate family over months of shared hardship. You know Riley has a sweetheart in Philadelphia who sends letters scented with lavender. You know Corporal Hayes has 3 children he's never seen, the youngest born after he left for war. You know Private Wilson was a butcher's apprentice and can identify cuts of meat even in the mysterious chunks provided by army contractors. Mail came while we were on patrol, Hayes mentions between bites. Thompson, there's something for you. Your heart lifts at this news. The expected package from home has finally arrived, offering the promise of familiar comforts and connection to the life you left behind. After dinner, you retrieve the package from the company clerk, a small wooden box carefully addressed in your mother's neat handwriting. Inside, wrapped in newspaper and cloth, you find homemade sausages cured to travel without spoiling, a small jar of honey, clean socks knitted with love evident in every stitch, and a fruitcake dense enough to serve as ammunition if necessary. The accompanying letter details life at home, the spring planting, your sister's new job teaching at the local school, your father's rheumatism acting up again during the wet spring. Between domestic news, your mother has tucked recipes, seemingly unable to comprehend that your cooking facilities consist of a campfire and perhaps a single pot if you're fortunate. Still, you read her instructions for honey-glazed ham and apple dumplings with longing, your mouth watering at the mere description of foods that exist now only in memory and hope for the future. Someday, when the war ends, you'll eat these dishes again at your family's table. For now, the sausages and honey will transform your rations into something special for a few precious days. Sleep comes easily that night despite the hard ground beneath your bedroll and the persistent cough of the man in the next tent. Your stomach, for once, feels reasonably full, and the connection to home provided by your mother's package soothes the loneliness that sometimes ambushes you in quiet moments. Morning arrives with steady rain that transforms the camp into a sea of mud. Fires sputter and smoke, making coffee preparation a challenge. Hardtack for breakfast again, but you've learned to enhance it, crushing it to a powder, mixing it with water and a bit of precious sugar to make a porridge, then adding thin slices of your mother's sausage. The result is still recognisably army food, but elevated by the smoky flavour of real meat not processed beyond recognition. The rain continues through midday, keeping most men confined to tents or huddled under whatever shelter can be improvised. You use the time to write letters home, carefully not mentioning the girl at the farmhouse or the true quality of army rations. Parents worry enough without knowing their son sometimes goes hungry or gives away food to enemy civilians. By afternoon, the rain slackens and you venture out to check on friends in neighbouring companies. The camp has become a quagmire, each step requiring careful navigation to avoid the deepest mud. Your boots, never fully dry from yesterday, now squelch audibly with each step. Near the hospital tents, you encounter Wilson consulting with a hospital steward about the evening meal for patients. Wilson's butchery knowledge has made him valuable to the medical staff trying to create digestible food for sick and wounded soldiers. They've got beef, Wilson tells you with obvious excitement. Real beef, not salt horse, fresh slaughtered yesterday. This is significant news. Fresh meat rarely reaches common soldiers except through foraging or hunting. The hospital patients needing proper nutrition to recover occasionally receive priority for better supplies, making beef tea for the worst cases, Wilson continues. But there will be bones and tough cuts left over. Steward says we can have them if we can make something useful. An opportunity presents itself. With bones, even stripped of most meat, you can make soup stock, simmering them for hours to extract every bit of flavour and nutrition. The tough cuts, properly prepared, can become stew meat far superior to the standard salt pork ration. We'll need vegetables, you say, thinking aloud. The desiccated vegetable ration would work if we can get enough, and barley or rice for bulk. Wilson nods, already planning. Hay's got beans in his package from home, and I've been saving coffee grounds. You can put them in a cloth bag in the stock. Adds colour and a bit of richness. Used coffee grounds as a soup ingredient would have seemed absurd in civilian life. Now it represents the kind of creative adaptation that defines army cooking. Nothing edible goes to waste. Everything serves multiple purposes when possible. By evening, a large pot simmers over your company's main fire, protected from lingering drizzle by an improvised canvas shelter. The aroma drawing soldiers from across the camp bears little resemblance to standard army fare. Beef bones and tough cuts, simmered for hours with desiccated vegetables reconstituted in the broth. Beans contributed by Hayes, barley from the company cook who was persuaded to part with a cup from his stores, and various herbs gathered from the surrounding countryside, combine to create a smell reminiscent of home kitchens rather than military camps. Word spreads, and men from other companies drift by, drawn by the smell and rumours of real beef. The unwritten law of army life, share with those who will share with you when fortunes reverse, means you can't turn them away. The pot is large, but not limitless. A hardtack contribution for a cup of soup, Riley announces to newcomers, establishing a fair exchange. Everyone has hardtack. It becomes the currency for this unexpected feast. Night falls as the soup continues to simmer, the flavours melding into something that exceeds the sum of its humble parts. Stars appear as the clouds finally clear and a nearly full moon illuminates the camp. In this light, with the smells of proper cooking in the air and the sounds of men talking quietly around fires, it's almost possible to forget the war. Almost, but not quite. When the soup is finally judged ready, distribution begins with careful fairness. Each man who contributed receives a full cup, with half portions for those who provided only hardtack. Even this rationing leaves the pot empty before all hopeful recipients are served, but that too is part of army life. Sometimes you receive bounty, sometimes you miss out. Your portion, enjoyed while sitting on a relatively dry log near the fire, represents the best meal you've had in weeks. The broth is rich with beef flavour, the vegetables soft but recognisable, the beans and barley providing satisfying substance. You dip your hardtack into it, letting the dry biscuit absorb the flavourful liquid, transforming the bland cracker into something delicious. Around you, conversation flows easily, men momentarily content with full stomachs and the simple pleasure of food that actually tastes good. Stories from home intermingle with humorous accounts of past meals gone wrong, failed experiments in army cooking that have become legendary within the company. Remember when Cooper tried to make pancakes with that weird flour the sutler was selling? Riley laughs. Turned green when he added water. Or that time we found all those blackberries and ate so many the whole company was running for the latrines at midnight, adds Hayes with a grin. These shared experiences, the good and the bad, the hunger and the occasional feast, bind you together as effectively as the shared dangers of battle. In many ways, the daily struggle for decent food defines army life more consistently than combat, which comes in intense bursts, separated by long stretches of mundane existence. As the fire burns down to embers and men drift away to their tents, you remain, savouring the last of your soup and the rare contentment that comes with a truly satisfying meal. Tomorrow will bring hardtack and salt pork again, but tonight you've experienced a reminder of what real food tastes like. Your eyes grow heavy as you watch the dying fire, the day's exertions, the satisfying meal, and the emotional comfort of connection to home through your mother's package combine to create a profound tiredness. Around you, the night sounds of the camp, quiet conversations, occasional laughter, the distant neigh of horses, sentries calling to each other as they change watch, form a familiar lullaby. Sleep approaches, your muscles relaxing one by one. Even the hard ground and thin bedroll seem welcoming to your tired body. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own hunger, but tonight, with the taste of beef soup still on your tongue and the comfort of shared experience warming your heart, feels almost like peace. As consciousness fades, your last thoughts are of home, of your mother's kitchen and meals taken for granted before war taught you the true value of food. Someday you'll sit at that table again. Someday hardtack and salt pork will be just stories to tell, experiences from a difficult time long past. For now, though, sleep offers escape from the constant calculations of how to transform army rations into something resembling real food. Your breathing slows, deepens, Outside, a sentry walks his post, keeping watch while you rest. The war continues, but for these few hours at least, hunger and hardship recede into the background, allowing the simple human pleasure of satisfied appetite to take precedence. Tomorrow is another day. Tomorrow you'll be hungry again. But tonight you sleep the sleep of the relatively well-fed, a luxury not to be underestimated in the midst of war. The first light of dawn filters through the canvas tent as you stir from sleep, your body already aware it's time to begin work, even before your mind fully awakens. The thin blanket does little to cushion your bones from the hard ground, but it's still better than what you slept on for most of your 32 years. Your hands, calloused from decades of work but now bearing new marks from different labours, automatically reach for the small bundle that contains everything you own in the world. 6 months ago, you were enslaved on a Georgia plantation. Now you're a contraband, the Union Army's term for escaped slaves who've reached their lines. Working as a cook in a camp near Vicksburg, Mississippi, freedom tastes both sweet and uncertain, a flavour you're still getting used to. The camp is already stirring as you emerge from the small tent you share with 3 other former slaves now working for the Union forces. The cold January air makes you pull your worn wool coat tighter around your frame. It's a cast-off from a Union soldier, 3 sizes too large, but the warmest thing you've ever owned. The blue fabric sometimes makes Confederate sympathizers mistake you for a soldier from a distance, a dangerous error that has nearly cost you your life twice already. Your assigned place is the officer's kitchen tent, where your knowledge of Southern cooking has made you valuable. The journey from slave to paid military cook has been strange and precarious, but at least your skills mean you eat regularly now, something not guaranteed to all contrabands who reach Union lines. The kitchen tent is already warm when you arrive, the wood stove stoked by an early rising assistant. The familiar smells of coffee and wood smoke greet you, comforting in their consistency. Your stomach growls, reminding you that last night's supper was meagre. Army beans with a small piece of salt pork, the standard fare when supplies run low. "Morning, Samuel," calls Captain Whitley's personal servant, a free black man from Massachusetts named James. Unlike you, he was born free and educated, his speech and manners markedly different from your own, yet you formed a cautious friendship based on your shared work and the colour of your skin in an army of white men. "Morning," you reply, immediately moving to the table where ingredients for the officer's breakfast await. The contrast between what officers eat and what common soldiers receive never ceases to amaze you. While the enlisted men make do with hardtack, salt pork and coffee, the officers' table this morning will feature fresh eggs acquired from a local farm ham that Captain Whitley received in a package from home, and biscuits made with actual white flour rather than the coarse cornmeal that forms the basis of most meals in camp. Your fingers, stiff from the cold, work the biscuit dough with practiced ease. On the plantation, you occasionally helped in the main house kitchen during large gatherings, learning techniques from the enslaved cook there. That knowledge serves you well now, though the army ingredients often differ from what was available in Georgia. "Officers want something special tonight," James informs you as he arranges cups for coffee. Some general passing through, Captain says to make do with what we have but make it impressive. You nod, mind already cataloguing available ingredients and possibilities. Making do has been your life's work, turning whatever was available into something that could sustain body and spirit. Even on the plantation, where you worked the fields rather than the kitchen, you learned to supplement the meagre rations provided by your enslaver with whatever could be found, grown, or trapped. As the biscuits bake in the cast-iron stove, filling the tent with their aroma, you begin planning the evening meal. The official supplies include salt pork, beans, rice, and coffee. Not enough for anything special, but you have other resources, knowledge that makes you valuable beyond your strong arms and back. The forests and fields around the camp contain food invisible to most soldiers' eyes. Wild onions grow in abundance near the creek where laundry is done. Pokeweed, though poisonous if prepared incorrectly, provides tender greens when properly boiled. Sassafras roots can be dried and ground for thickening stews or making tea, and you've spotted persimmon trees that still hold some withered winter fruit, sweeter now after the frosts than in their autumn prime. While the officers breakfast on eggs and ham, you slip away for an hour of foraging. Your worn boots crunch through frost-stiffened grass as you make your way toward the wooded area beyond the camp perimeter. The sentry, recognizing you from previous expeditions, waves you through with only a cursory warning to watch for Confederate scouts. The winter landscape appears barren to untrained eyes, but you see potential meals everywhere. Your gnarled hands, marked by years of cotton picking before the war, changed everything. Now carefully dig beneath a particular oak tree, uncovering a cluster of winter mushrooms growing from buried roots. Not the most flavourful variety, but when dried and reconstituted in broth, they add a meatiness that's welcome when protein is scarce. Near a partially frozen stream, you find a patch of watercress, its peppery leaves still vibrant green despite the season. Into your sack it goes, along with wild onions pulled from the soft earth near the water's edge. Their sharp scent clings to your fingers as you work quickly, aware that time away from camp is limited. The real prize comes when you spot tracks in the mud, possum or raccoon, you're not certain which, but either would make a welcome addition to the pot. Setting a simple snare with practiced hands, you mark the location in your mind. You'll return before evening to check it, hopefully finding meat to supplement the officer's meal. As you gather the last of the wild greens, your thoughts drift to the contrast between this life and your previous one. The work is still hard, the future uncertain, but for the first time you receive payment for your labour, $10 a month, though the army deducts $3 for the clothes they've provided. It's more money than you've ever possessed, though still less than white labourers receive for the same work. The changing relationship with food marks your transition to freedom most tangibly. On the plantation, you were always hungry, your rations deliberately kept minimal. Cornmeal, occasional salt pork, molasses if the harvest had been good. Now, while the army diet is monotonous, there's usually enough. And your knowledge of foraging means you eat better than many soldiers, supplementing official rations with nature's overlooked bounty. Back at camp, the kitchen is alive with preparation for midday meal. James gives you a questioning look as you enter with your bulging sack. Found some things for tonight, you explain, setting the foraged items on a side table away from the main cooking area. No need to advertise your plans until you've had a chance to check your snare. The officers' lunch is simple by their standards, salt beef stew with army biscuits and coffee. As you serve it in their dining tent, you catch fragments of conversation about troop movements, supply problems, and news from the Eastern Theatre. These white men in their pressed uniforms, with their maps and strategies, control the war that has unexpectedly given you a tentative freedom. Their decisions will determine whether that freedom lasts beyond the current conflict. Captain Whitley, noticing you lingering near the table, gestures toward a stew pot. Samuel will need to know how many for dinner tonight. General Porter and his staff will join us, perhaps 8 additional officers. The captain's personal cook, a nervous white man from Ohio who handles the officers' meals when special attention is required, nods briskly. "We'll manage, sir, though supplies are limited." "I've seen Samuel work miracles with limited supplies before," Whitley responds with a thin smile. "I'm sure tonight will be no exception. Their confidence in your abilities would be flattering if it didn't come with such pressure. Still, you've faced worse challenges with far less support. At least here, failure means disappointment rather than the lash." After lunch, service ends, you return to check your snare while the white cook begins dinner preparations. The January air has grown colder, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. Your breath forms clouds as you make your way back to the wooded area, hoping the trap has proven successful. The gods of hunger must be smiling today. The snare holds a fat possum, its struggle already ended. With practiced movements, you reset the trap in case fortune favours you twice, then quickly field dress the animal. Its warm blood steams in the cold air as you work, the meat representing a significant improvement to tonight's planned meal. On the walk back to camp, you encounter another contraband, a woman perhaps a few years younger than yourself, gathering firewood with her small son. Like many who've escaped slavery and sought refuge with Union forces, they exist on the edges of the camp, doing laundry and other tasks in exchange for protection and meagre rations. "Morning, Esther," you greet her, noting how thin both mother and child appear. The army provides for those it employs directly, like yourself, but others receive less consistent support. Her eyes move to the possum in your hand, hunger evident in her gaze. Without hesitation, you pull your knife and cut away a portion of the meat, wrapping it in a large leaf before handing it to her. "Make sure you boil it good first," you advise, "then fry it with whatever fat you can find." Her gratitude manifests not in effusive thanks, but in a simple nod, one survivor to another, acknowledging the shared understanding that no one gets through these times alone. The boy stares at the wrapped meat with wide eyes, perhaps not remembering the last time he had fresh protein. Back at the kitchen tent, you find the white cook, a man named Ellis, already fretting over the evening meal. "We've got rice, beans, salt pork, and hardtack to work with," he complains. "How am I supposed to make something special from that?" You set your forage treasures on the table without comment. The possum meat, wild mushrooms, watercress, wild onions, and sassafras root. Ellis's expression shifts from exasperation to cautious optimism. "What exactly do you plan to do with all this?" he asks, poking at the possum meat with a suspicious finger. "Make do," you reply simply, echoing the captain's earlier instruction. The next hours pass in coordinated cooking efforts. Ellis, for all his initial skepticism, knows his business with the standard army ingredients. He transforms the beans and rice into something resembling a proper pilaf, using the last of the camp's pepper and a carefully hoarded bay leaf. Your contribution is more unorthodox. The possum, thoroughly cleaned and parboiled to remove any gamey taste, is rubbed with wild onion and the few spices available before being slow roasted over the fire. The mushrooms, reconstituted in warm water, form the base of a gravy thickened with crushed hardtack and seasoned with foraged herbs. The watercress becomes a simple salad dressed with a bit of vinegar and the last drops of olive oil from the officers' stores. It's a luxury the common soldiers would find unimaginable. Fresh greens in January. As the afternoon wanes, bringing early winter darkness, other contrabands drift toward the kitchen tent, drawn by smells that stand out from the usual camp aromas. A young man who escaped from a Mississippi plantation 3 weeks ago lingers particularly close, his hunger evident in how he watches every movement. "Need help carrying things to the officer's tent later?" he offers, clearly hoping for a taste of whatever has created such enticing smells. You recognize the strategy, one you've employed yourself in the past. Might need help, you agree. Stick around. Ellis either doesn't notice the exchange or chooses to ignore it. He's focused on a sweet potato pudding, the last of the vegetables acquired from a local farm, being transformed into a dessert sweetened with the dregs of molasses from the bottom of a nearly empty jug. As evening fully descends, the officers gather in their dining tent, which has been arranged as formally as field conditions allow. Mismatched plates and utensils have been laid out on a table covered with reasonably clean canvas, while lanterns cast a warm glow that masks imperfections. The serving begins, you and Ellis carrying in steaming platters while the young contraband and James follow with additional dishes. The officers' reactions are gratifying: surprise at the fresh greens, appreciation for the savoury possum, which Ellis has wisely introduced simply as roast game, and evident enjoyment of the mushroom gravy that disguises the humble origins of the reconstituted hardtack beneath. "Remarkable what your people can do with army rations, Whitley," comments General Porter, helping himself to a second serving of possum. "My compliments to your cook." "Samuel deserves most of the credit tonight," Captain Whitley responds, nodding in your direction. "He has a talent for finding what the rest of us overlook." The General's eyes meet yours briefly, with the cursory acknowledgement that passes for respect in these interactions. "Good man," he says, before returning to his conversation with the other officers. Those two words, casually offered and quickly forgotten by the speaker, settle into your chest with unexpected weight. Good man, not boy, not you there, not any of the countless degrading terms you've answered to throughout your life. A small thing perhaps, but another marker of the distance travelled from your former existence. After serving dessert, the sweet potato pudding receiving particular praise, you and the other kitchen workers retire to your own meal. As promised, you've set aside portions for those who helped, including generous servings for the young contraband whose name you've learned is Isaiah. "Where'd you learn about all them wild things?" Isaiah asks between eager bites of possum meat. "The mushrooms and such?" The question brings memories flooding back. Your grandmother, ancient even when you were a child, teaching you to identify plants that could heal and plants that could nourish. Knowledge passed down through generations, preserved despite everything that was taken from your people. "My grandmama showed me," you answer simply. "She knew all the growing things and what they was good for, said it was important to remember 'cause such knowledge might save you someday." And it has, you reflect, not just by keeping your body fed, but by giving you value in this new, uncertain world. The ability to transform overlooked ingredients into satisfying meals has provided a place in the Union camp that offers more protection than many contrabands receive. The conversation turns to news that's circulating among the black workers and soldiers, rumors that President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation might actually be enforced as Union forces push deeper into Confederate territory. No one is certain what this will mean once the fighting ends, but the possibility of lasting freedom hangs in the air like smoke, sometimes visible and sometimes merely sensed. "My cousin joined one of them coloured regiments," Isaiah mentions, his voice dropping despite the fact that no white officers are nearby. "Fighting for the Union now, says if we don't fight for freedom ourselves, ain't nobody gonna give it to us proper." You nod, understanding his meaning. Though you've chosen to serve as a cook rather than a soldier, you've seen the black troops drilling at the edge of camp. Their presence represents something unimaginable just a few years ago. Armed black men in uniform, sanctioned by the government that had previously enshrined your enslavement in law. After the meal, while cleaning the kitchen area, you set aside bones and scraps that others might discard. Tomorrow, these will become soup stock, extracting every possible calorie from the day's fortune. You've learned never to waste anything edible, a lesson from slavery that serves well in wartime. The night grows colder as you finally head back to your tent, bones aching from a long day of standing and cooking. Snow has begun to fall, delicate flakes catching in your breath as you walk carefully through the darkened camp. Inside the tent, your 3 tent mates are already huddled under their blankets, seeking warmth in shared body heat. You join them, adding your own blanket to the communal pile. Despite the cold seeping through canvas walls and up from the frozen ground, there's comfort in this arrangement. People looking out for one another, sharing what little they have. As you settle into your spot, muscles gradually relaxing, your mind drifts to the uncertain future. What happens when this war eventually ends? The army provides structure now, a place where your skills earn recognition and payment. But afterward, will the freedom promised by distant politicians translate into real opportunity, or will new forms of control replace the old? These unanswerable questions circle like hungry crows as sleep approaches. Your last conscious thoughts focus instead on tomorrow's tasks, checking the snare again at first light, searching for winter roots near the creek bend, perhaps teaching Isaiah more about identifying edible plants. Small, manageable plans that anchor you in the present rather than the uncertain future. Your breathing slows as your body surrenders to exhaustion. Outside, snow continues to fall, covering the camp in clean whiteness that will turn to mud with tomorrow's activities. The war grinds on, generals plan their strategies, and you, caught in currents of history beyond your control, navigate this strange new world one meal at a time. Sleep claims you finally, dreams mixing memories of Georgia fields with the day's events. In these dreams, you gather ingredients not just for officers' meals, but for your own table, in your own home, serving children and grandchildren who will never know the lash or auction block. Whether such dreams can become reality remains to be seen, but tonight, at least, they provide comfort as deep as any full belly. The next morning arrives with stark brightness, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow that blankets the camp. Your body protests as you rise from the relative warmth of shared blankets, joints stiff from cold and the previous day's work. But there's no time to ease into the day. Officers expect their breakfast at the same hour regardless of weather. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you make your way to the kitchen tent. The camp is quieter than usual, the white covering muffling sounds and keeping many indoors who don't have essential duties. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air and you pull your coat tighter, grateful again for its warmth despite the ill fit. In the kitchen, the stove has been lit but provides little heat beyond its immediate vicinity. Your fingers feel clumsy with cold as you begin mixing biscuit dough, working from memory rather than any written recipe. Flour, the precious small amount of lard saved from yesterday's cooking, a pinch of salt and water, simple ingredients transformed by knowing hands. While the biscuits bake, you brew coffee for the officers and a chicory substitute for the kitchen workers. The rich aroma fills the tent, promising warmth and alertness. You add a small spoonful of molasses to your own cup, the sweetness a rare indulgence that reminds you of Sunday mornings on the plantation when work started later and there was occasionally time to savour small pleasures. James arrives as you're setting out plates, his normally impeccable appearance slightly dishevelled from hurrying through the snow. Captain says they'll take breakfast in their quarters this morning, he informs you. Too cold in the dining tent. This means extra work. delivering individual trays, but also offers an opportunity. With officers staying in their tents, they'll be less likely to notice your brief absence to check the snare you set yesterday. After preparing and delivering the breakfast trays, you slip away from camp again, following your tracks from the previous day, now partially filled with fresh snow. The forest seems transformed, branches heavy with white, the usual sounds absorbed by the snow's soft presence. It reminds you of rare winter mornings in Georgia when snow would bring plantation work to a temporary halt, creating brief respite from endless labor. The snare holds another surprise. Not a possum this time, but a plump rabbit, its brown fur stark against the snow, a welcome find, though smaller than yesterday's catch. As you reset the trap, your experienced eyes scan the surrounding area, noting tracks that reveal where game has recently passed. You adjust the snare's position slightly, increasing chances for another successful catch. On the return journey, you detour to check a stand of pine trees you've noted previously. Carefully peeling back sections of outer bark, you expose the inner bark that can be dried and ground into a flour substitute when other options are scarce. It's bitter but nutritious. Knowledge that kept some enslaved people alive during particularly harsh times when plantation rations proved insufficient. The camp has fully awakened by your return, men trudging through snow for morning drill despite the conditions. The winter campaign continues regardless of weather, Union forces preparing for spring offensives that officers discuss in lowered voices during meals. In the kitchen tent, you find Isaiah waiting, eager to learn more about wild foods as promised. Despite the extra work his presence creates, explaining while working is harder than simply doing the tasks yourself. You value the opportunity to pass on knowledge that might help him survive whatever comes next. This here's pine bark, you explain, showing him your morning's collection. Not something you'd choose if you got better, but it'll keep hunger away when there's nothing else. Gotta dry it, then pound it fine as you can. Mix it with cornmeal if you got any, makes the taste less sharp. Isaiah watches intently as your hands demonstrate the preparation technique. My ma used to make flour from acorns sometimes, he offers. Had to soak them special to get the bitter out. You nod in recognition of shared knowledge. Your ma taught you right. Different kinds of acorns need different soaking. The white ones ain't so bitter, can use them quicker. This exchange of survival techniques continues throughout the morning as you prepare lunch. Standard army beans for the soldiers, slightly enhanced with wild onions for the officers. Isaiah proves a quick study, his youth not diminishing his appreciation for information that bridges the gap between hunger and sustenance. When he eventually leaves to attend other duties, he works primarily as a labourer unloading supply wagons. You feel a satisfaction different from successfully feeding officers. Teaching creates connection, affirms the value of knowledge preserved through generations of hardship. Isaiah may someday pass these same techniques to his own children, knowledge flowing forward like a river finding new channels. The remainder of the day passes in routine tasks, checking stores, preparing dinner, simpler than the previous night's special meal, cleaning equipment. Your rabbit becomes part of your own evening meal rather than the officers, shared among the kitchen workers and a few other contrabands who have become part of your informal community. As darkness falls earlier than seems possible, you find yourself sitting near the kitchen stove with James and Ellis, the day's work complete, but the tent still offering more warmth than your sleeping quarters. Conversation flows sporadically, comfortable silences interspersed with observations about camp life or cautious speculations about the war's progress. Heard tell of black troops being raised all through the north now, James mentions, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced when he's tired. Full regiments with coloured officers too, some places. Ellis shifts uncomfortably at this topic. Though he works alongside you daily, the idea of black men in authority clearly unsettles him. Captain says this war's about preserving the Union, not, he trails off, perhaps remembering belatedly that he's speaking to men whose entire existence has been defined by the institution he hesitates to name. Not making folks like us equal? You finish for him, your tone neutral rather than confrontational. There's no benefit in antagonizing someone you must work with daily, regardless of his views. The conversation lapses into another silence, this one less comfortable than before. Eventually, Ellis excuses himself to his own quarters, leaving you and James alone by the dying stove. He's not the worst of them, James observes after Ellis has gone. At least he looks you in the eye when speaking. You nod in acknowledgement. The spectrum of treatment from white soldiers ranges from outright hostility to awkward attempts at equitable interaction, with most falling somewhere in the uncertain middle, men raised with certain beliefs now confronted with circumstances that challenge those foundations. My grandmama used to say, "Judge a man by how he treats them, he don't have to be kind to." You reply, "Ellis treats us fair enough when work needs doing. That's more than some." The fire has burned down to embers, the tent's temperature dropping noticeably. It's time to brave the cold walk back to your sleeping quarters. You bank the stove carefully. Wasting fuel is an offence that could cost your position before buttoning your coat and preparing to face the winter night. Outside, the temperature has dropped further, stars sharp and brilliant in a clear sky above the snow-covered camp. Your breath freezes almost instantly, forming a light frost on your beard as you walk. The snow squeaks beneath your boots, so cold now that it no longer yields, but crunches with each step. Halfway to your tent, you pause, struck by the incongruous beauty of the moment. The camp stretches before you, white and clean under starlight, campfires creating islands of golden warmth amid the silvery landscape. For a brief instant, the war seems distant, the questions about future freedom suspended, and you exist simply as a man standing beneath an infinite sky, connected to the earth and elements in ways that transcend the artificial boundaries humans create between one another. The moment passes as quickly as it arrived, broken by the distant call of a century-changing watch. Reality reasserts itself. You are still in a military camp in the midst of a war that will determine your fate. The cold seeps deeper into your bones, urging movement toward shelter. In your tent, the other men are already asleep, their breathing forming a chorus of soft snores and deeper rumbles. You remove your boots but keep your coat on as you slip beneath your blanket, adding your body to the shared warmth. Despite the day's exertions, sleep doesn't come immediately. Your mind circles back to the conversation with Ellis and James, to the uncertain status you occupy in this transitional space between slavery and whatever comes next. Eventually, physical exhaustion overcomes mental restlessness. Your muscles relax one by one, tension flowing out of your body into the hard ground beneath. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. More meals to prepare, more ingredients to forage, more navigation of the complex human relationships that define camp life. But tonight, with a full stomach and relative safety, represents a kind of freedom that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Your breathing slows, deepens, dreams approach, carrying you away from the cold tent and war-torn landscape. In these dreams, you cook not for officers, but for your own family, using knowledge preserved through generations to create nourishment from whatever the earth provides. The line between past and future blurs, ancestors and descendants gathering around a hurry along Philadelphia's busy streets, your wicker basket heavy with supplies for today's work. Your arms ache from carrying the load 6 blocks from the market, but you quicken your pace anyway. There's too much to do at the Sanitary Commission offices to waste time dawdling, even if your 35-year-old bones protest the rapid clip. 2 years into the war, your life has transformed from that of a comfortable merchant's wife to something altogether different. The comfortable parlour where you once entertained guests now serves as a staging area for donation boxes. Your fine china cabinet holds bandages and medicinal supplies instead of wedding crystal, and your days, once filled with social calls and household management, now revolve entirely around the war effort. You climb the steps to the converted warehouse that houses the Philadelphia branch of the United States Sanitary Commission, nodding to other women arriving for the day's work. Inside, the cavernous space buzzes with activity despite the early hour. Dozens of women sort donations, pack boxes, write letters, and coordinate the massive effort to supply Union soldiers with necessities beyond what the government provides. "Charlotte, thank heavens you're here," calls Mrs. Harrison, the iron-spined widow who runs this branch with military precision. "The Food Preservation Committee is meeting in 10 minutes, and we've received another letter from that Army surgeon in Virginia about scurvy cases." You shed your coat and gloves quickly, transferring your market purchases to the food preparation area before joining the committee gathering around a large table covered with papers, samples, and a map showing Union Army positions. "Ladies," begins Mrs. Harrison when everyone is seated, "we face an escalating situation regarding nutritional deficiencies in the Army of the Potomac. Dr. Moore reports 37 new cases of scurvy last week alone, despite our previous shipments." The news sends a ripple of concern through the group. Scurvy, caused by lack of vitamin C, though the scientific understanding of this is still emerging, can debilitate soldiers as effectively as Confederate bullets. Bleeding gums, loose teeth, joint pain, and weakness can render fighting men invalids if not addressed. "The problem," continues Mrs. Harrison, "is twofold. First, the Army's supply lines are stretched thin, with much of what's sent being diverted or spoiling before reaching troops. Second, the soldiers are trading or discarding the desiccated vegetables we've been sending because, frankly, they find them unpalatable." You think of the compressed vegetable cakes that have become a staple of Union Army provisions, dense bricks of dried carrots, turnips, cabbage, and other vegetables that can be reconstituted in boiling water. In theory, they provide essential nutrients in a form that won't spoil during transport. In practice, the resulting mush tastes so terrible that soldiers have taken to calling them desecrated vegetables. "We need alternatives," Mrs. Harrison states firmly. "Foods that provide the necessary nutrition, can survive transport without spoiling, and that soldiers will actually eat. Charlotte, I believe you've been experimenting with some possibilities. All eyes turn to you. Your recent work has focused on this exact problem, drawing on both traditional preservation techniques and newer innovations." You stand, smoothing your plain work dress, and address the committee. "I've been exploring several approaches," you begin, pulling samples from your basket. "First, pickled fruits and vegetables beyond the usual cucumbers, watermelon rind preserves, pickled beets and spiced pears all transport well and provide nutrients while being palatable enough that soldiers might actually consume them. You set out small jars containing each sample. The bright colours, ruby red beets, amber pears, translucent watermelon rind, stand in stark contrast to the utilitarian surroundings. Second, fruit leathers made by drying fruit pulp. These are lightweight, keep indefinitely if properly dried, and offer a concentrated form of the same benefits found in fresh fruit. They can be eaten as is or reconstituted in water. The leathery strips of dried apple and berry pulp earn appreciative nods. Unlike the army's desiccated vegetables, these actually taste good while providing similar nutritional benefits. Third, vinegar tonics infused with pine needles, which sailors have long used to prevent scurvy on long voyages. The taste is bracing but not unpleasant, especially with a bit of honey added. A small daily dose could help prevent deficiencies even when fresh produce isn't available. This more medicinal approach raises a few eyebrows, but the committee members are practical women accustomed to unconventional solutions in wartime. And finally, you continue, portable soup, a concentrated broth made by boiling down stock until it forms a solid cake that can be carried in a haversack and reconstituted when needed. With the right ingredients, it provides both nutrition and comfort. You display a small dark brown square that resembles nothing so much as a piece of shoe leather. Despite its unappetizing appearance, you know it contains the essence of vegetables and herbs boiled down to their most concentrated form, an 18th century innovation that's finding new relevance in this modern war. Mrs. Harrison examines each sample with the critical eye of someone who understands both nutritional needs and practical constraints. These all show promise, she acknowledges. The question becomes one of scale. Can we produce enough to make a difference? This is the perpetual challenge of the Sanitary Commission's work, the gap between good ideas and implementation on the massive scale required by an army of hundreds of thousands. Your own kitchen experiments are one thing, coordinating production among hundreds of Philadelphia households is quite another. I've prepared instruction sheets, you respond, passing out papers containing recipes and preservation methods. If each woman in our network prepared even 1 jar of pickles or 1 pound of fruit leather weekly, we could supply an entire regiment. For the portable soup and vinegar tonic, we might establish production centres where larger batches could be prepared efficiently. Discussion erupts around the table. Questions of containers, transport, distribution, and instructing soldiers on proper use. These are educated, capable women who managed households before the war and now apply those same organisational skills to sustaining an army. The logistical challenges are daunting, but not insurmountable. By meeting's end, a plan takes shape. Recipe sheets will be distributed throughout the city's neighbourhoods, collection points established for finished products, special packing instructions developed to ensure safe transport to the front. Your kitchen experiments have evolved into a coordinated campaign. As the committee disperses to their various duties, Mrs. Harrison holds you back with a gentle touch on your arm. There's something else, she says quietly. A special request from General Grant's headquarters. They're planning for the spring campaign and want to provide emergency rations that soldiers can carry when separated from supply wagons. Something more nutritious than hardtack, but equally portable and durable. The challenge intrigues you immediately. Standard Army field rations, hardtack and salt pork, provide calories but little else nutritionally. Soldiers operating behind enemy lines or on rapid marches often subsist on these basics for days or weeks, their health suffering as a result. I'll need to experiment, you tell her. Perhaps something incorporating dried meat, nuts and fruit in a compact form. The pemmican used by Western explorers might offer a starting point. Use whatever resources you need, Mrs. Harrison replies. This could save lives if we get it right. With this new assignment adding to your already full plate, you head to the food preparation area where your market purchases await. The large communal kitchen serves multiple purposes for the Commission: testing preservation methods, preparing food for local hospitals, and demonstrating techniques for volunteers. Today, you'll be pickling beets using a method designed to preserve maximum nutritional value while creating a product that can withstand the rigors of military transport. Around you, other women work on different projects, drying apple slices on long strings, packing carefully wrapped pound cakes destined for a nearby military hospital, labeling jars of home-canned peaches. You roll up your sleeves and don a large apron, your fingers automatically reaching to remove your wedding ring before plunging hands into the inevitable mess of food preparation. The simple gold band catches the light as you place it in your apron pocket, prompting a momentary thought of your husband, now serving as a quartermaster with Union forces in Tennessee. His letters describe the challenges of feeding an army on the move, confirming the importance of your work here. The beets require thorough washing before being boiled in their skins. As you scrub the earthy root vegetables, your mind works on the emergency ration problem. Traditional pemmican combines dried meat pounded to powder with rendered fat and dried berries. High in calories and nutrients, stable without refrigeration, but not particularly appealing to palates accustomed to Eastern cuisine. Perhaps a modified approach. Jerked beef is already familiar to many soldiers. Combined with dried fruit, nuts, and perhaps a binding agent like molasses or honey, it could form a compact cake providing protein, fats, and carbohydrates in a relatively palatable form. You look deep in thought, observes Mrs. Foster, a banker's wife who works alongside you most days. Her once soft hands now show the same work-hardened calluses as your own, badges of honour in this new reality where ladies do manual labour without complaint. Trying to invent a new type of field ration, you explain, setting the cleaned beets into a large pot of water. Something better than hardtack, but equally portable. My son wrote that some soldiers are mixing hardtack crumbs with sugar and fat when they can get it, she offers. Calls it a hellfire cake because it burns in the stomach something fierce but keeps a man going all day. This informal intelligence from the front lines proves as valuable as any official report. Soldiers, by necessity, become innovators with the limited resources available to them. Their field adaptations often suggest directions for more formal development. As the beets boil, filling the kitchen with their earthy scent, you jot notes for experiments to try. The emergency ration will need careful balance. Too much fat will turn rancid, too little will reduce caloric value. Dried fruit provides both sweetness and essential nutrients, while nuts add protein and beneficial oils. The challenge lies in combining these elements in a form that remains stable under battlefield conditions. The morning passes in efficient activity, your hands working almost independently of your mind as you process the beets, peeling the cooked vegetables, slicing them into uniform pieces, preparing the pickling solution of vinegar, sugar, and spices. By midday, you filled 12 jars with ruby red beets suspended in clear liquid, each carefully sealed and labelled for transport. After a quick lunch of bread and cheese brought from home, you turn attention to your new project. The Commission's storerooms contain most of what you need. Dried beef from a recent donation drive, dried apples and berries prepared by volunteers last autumn, nuts collected by school children as part of their war contribution. Only a few ingredients require purchase, which you'll handle on tomorrow's market trip. The afternoon's experimental work produces 3 variations on portable emergency rations. The first combines powdered dried beef with rendered pork fat, dried berries and cornmeal, closest to traditional pemmican, but adapted with ingredients familiar to Eastern soldiers. The second uses molasses as a binding agent instead of fat, resulting in a firmer, sweeter product resembling modern energy bars. The third, inspired by Mrs. Foster's Hellfire Cake report, incorporates crushed hardtack for bulk and stability. Each variation gets carefully wrapped and labelled, ready for evaluation by the committee tomorrow. Samples will eventually go to the front lines for testing under actual field conditions, but initial assessments of durability and palatability can happen here. By the time you finish cleaning your workspace, the short winter day is already fading toward dusk. Your back aches from hours of standing, and your right hand cramps slightly from the fine knife work required for uniform slicing. These minor discomforts register but don't truly trouble you. They're small sacrifices compared to what soldiers endure. You don your coat and gloves, preparing for the walk home through streets now darkening with evening shadows. The basket that arrived full of market purchases now contains your notebook, a small portion of leftover dried beef for tomorrow's experiments, and 3 jars of pickled beets deemed too imperfect for military shipment but perfectly suitable for home consumption. Philadelphia bustles with its usual early evening activity as you walk. Shopkeepers closing for the day, workers heading home, newspaper boys shouting headlines about distant battles. The war feels simultaneously ever-present and strangely remote, a paradox you've grown accustomed to over the past 2 years. At home, your reduced household staff, cook and maid retained while others left for war work or manufacturing jobs, has maintained basic order despite your frequent absences. Dinner awaits, simple but nourishing. Tonight it's bean soup with salt pork and cornbread, a meal not so different from what soldiers might receive on a good day in camp. You eat at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room, exchanging news of the day with Mary, your cook of 15 years whose son now serves with a Pennsylvania regiment. Her practical knowledge of food preservation has proven invaluable in your commission work, the traditional class boundaries between you blurring in the face of shared purpose. "I've been thinking about those emergency rations you mentioned this morning," Mary says as she serves the soup. "My grandmother used to make something she called travel bread when the men went on long hunting trips. Cornmeal, rendered fat, dried meat and maple sugar pressed into cakes hard as stone. Said a piece the size of your palm would keep a man going all day." This is precisely the kind of traditional knowledge that often proves most valuable, techniques refined over generations to solve practical problems of survival. "Do you remember how she made it?" you ask, immediately interested. Mary nods. "The trick was cooking the cornmeal first in a little water, then mixing everything while it was still hot. When it cooled, it set up hard, but would still soften in your mouth or in hot water if you had it." You make a note to try this method tomorrow. The pre-cooking of cornmeal might solve the texture problems you encountered with your third sample today, which remained somewhat crumbly despite your best efforts at compression. After dinner, you settle in your husband's study, now converted to a home workspace for commission business. Letters need answering, reports require review, and tomorrow's experiments demand planning. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 9 before you realise how late it's grown. Your focus on work having eclipsed awareness of time passing. As you prepare for bed, your thoughts drift again to your husband, facing his own challenges, keeping supply lines functioning in the Western theatre. Your separate war work has kept you apart for months at a stretch, your marriage maintained through letters that take weeks to arrive. Sometimes you wonder what reintegration will feel like when the fighting eventually ends, whether the independent capabilities you've both developed will complement or conflict when normal life resumes. If normal life ever resumes, 2 years of war have fundamentally altered the nation's fabric, creating new realities that can't simply be undone when peace returns. Your own transformation from society wife to sanitary commission coordinator represents just one thread in a vast tapestry of change. Sleep comes slowly despite physical exhaustion, your mind still working on solutions to the emergency ration problem. In the drifting space between wakefulness and dreams, ideas bubble up, using honey as both preservative and binding agent, incorporating dried eggs for additional protein, finding ways to prevent the fat component from turning rancid in summer heat. Morning arrives with pale sunlight filtering through your bedroom curtains and the distant sounds of the city beginning its day. Your body protests briefly as you rise, muscles stiff from yesterday's work, but routine carries you forward, washing, dressing in another practical work dress, securing your hair in a simple style that won't interfere with the day's activities. Breakfast is quick. Tea, toast with a bit of precious butter, and one of your experimental emergency ration bars. The flavour isn't unpleasant, though the texture needs improvement. It provides surprising satiety for its small size, an encouraging sign for its intended purpose. The day ahead holds committee reports, another pickling session focused on onions this time, and further experimentation with the emergency rations incorporating Mary's travel bread technique. Beyond that stretches the seemingly endless work of supporting an army that grows larger with each passing month, its needs multiplying faster than civilian efforts can meet them. Yet, as you gather your materials and prepare to leave for another day at the commission offices, you feel a sense of purpose that transcends the exhaustion. Your work directly contributes to keeping soldiers alive and functioning, not through weapons or tactics, but through the fundamental necessity of nourishment. The fruits of women's traditional knowledge, preserving, pickling, drying, adapting recipes to available ingredients, have found new significance in this conflict. Skills once valued primarily for household economy now serve national strategic interests. The jars of pickled vegetables leaving your kitchen might prevent scurvy in a regiment preparing for spring offensives. The emergency ration you're developing could sustain scouts gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. Outside, the March wind still carries winter's bite, but hints of spring appear in small ways, a few brave crocuses pushing through soil in your front garden, slightly longer daylight hours, birds returning from southern migrations. The seasonal rhythm continues, despite the human conflict superimposed upon it. You lock your front door and step into the morning, basket once again filled with supplies for the day's work. Around you, Philadelphia proceeds with its wartime routine. Women heading to factories where they've replaced male workers, children collecting scrap metal for the war effort. Wounded soldiers on convalescent leave navigating streets with crutches or empty sleeves pinned to their jackets. This is not the life you envisioned when you married a prosperous merchant 15 years ago, expecting a comfortable progression through the predictable stages of a society wife's existence. Instead, you found yourself transformed by circumstances into something altogether different, a creator of solutions to problems you never imagined facing, a coordinator of efforts that span from individual kitchens to battlefield hospitals hundreds of miles away. As you walk toward the commission building, your mind already refining yesterday's recipes and planning today's experiments, you reflect on the strange alchemy of war, how it destroys and creates simultaneously, breaking down established patterns while forging new ones from necessity. Your pickled beets and emergency ration bars represent tiny elements in this vast transformation, humble contributions to a conflict whose full significance remains beyond comprehension in the moment of living through it. The commission building comes into view, other women already gathering on its steps with their own baskets and bundles. You quicken your pace to join them, ready for another day of translating traditional food knowledge into modern survival tools. The work awaits, immediate and practical, demanding focus on today's tasks rather than abstract contemplation of the war's meaning. Inside, Mrs. Harrison has already posted the day's assignments and meeting schedule. Your name appears beside emergency ration development and pickle production supervision. Exactly as expected, you hang your coat on the communal rack, don your work apron, and step fully into the day's demands. By noon, Mary's travel bread technique has proven its worth. The pre-cooked cornmeal binds the other ingredients far more effectively than your previous attempts, resulting in a compact cake that resists crumbling while remaining chewable. You've produced a dozen test samples with varying proportions of ingredients, each carefully labelled for systematic evaluation. The afternoon pickled onion session proceeds efficiently with 10 volunteers under your guidance. The sharp aroma fills the kitchen area, bringing tears to everyone's eyes but spirits remaining high. These women understand that their stinging eyes and vinegar-scented hands contribute directly to soldiers' health, their discomfort insignificant compared to battlefield suffering. As you supervise the proper sealing of jars, a critical step for preventing spoilage during long transport, Mrs. Harrison approaches with a telegram in hand. "Charlotte, excellent news," she announces, her normally stern expression softened by satisfaction. Reports from the Army of the Potomac Medical Director confirm scurvy cases declined by 40% after our last shipment of preserved fruits. Our work is making a measurable difference. The simple statement, delivered with characteristic restraint, nevertheless sends a wave of emotion through you and the other women, concrete evidence that your collective efforts translate to real results: fewer soldiers suffering, more men remaining fit for duty, lives potentially saved through the humble medium of preserved food. You think again of those compressed cakes of desiccated vegetables that soldiers find so unpalatable they'd rather risk scurvy than consume them. Your pickled beets and onions, while never destined for culinary awards, at least offer enough flavour to ensure they'll actually be eaten. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution isn't the most effective one. By day's end, you've finalised the emergency ration recipe, documented precise instructions for its production, and scheduled a full committee review for tomorrow. The pickled onions stand in neat rows, cooling and sealing, ready for packing and shipment next week. Your market list for tomorrow includes ingredients for experiments with concentrated lemon syrup as a portable source of vitamin C. As you walk home in the gathering dusk, physically tired but mentally satisfied, you notice small signs of ordinary life continuing amid war's disruptions. Children playing in a park, a young couple walking arm in arm, shopkeepers still selling non-essential items like ribbons and candies. The human capacity to maintain normality within abnormal circumstances never ceases to amaze you. Your own life has found a new pattern too, different from pre-war days, but with its own rhythm and purpose. The exhaustion you feel at day's end comes with the knowledge of contribution, of skills applied to meaningful work. Your experiments with food preservation draw on centuries of women's practical knowledge, adapting traditional techniques to meet unprecedented needs. At home, you find a letter from your husband waiting, likely written weeks ago, but only now finding its way to your hands. You save it for after dinner, a private communion with his words to end your day. His descriptions of quartermaster challenges will interest you professionally now, not just personally. Another change wrought by your commission work. As you settle into your chair by the fire, letter finally opened and his familiar handwriting connecting you across hundreds of miles, you reflect on how food, its preparation, preservation and distribution has become a central battlefield of this war, one where women fight with ladles and pickling spices rather than rifles and bayonets. Your heavy eyelids begin to close despite your interest in the letter's contents. Sleep approaches rapidly, your body demanding rest after another long day. The last conscious thought before surrendering to slumber centers on tomorrow's lemon syrup experiments and the potential difference they might make for soldiers who've gone months without tasting anything remotely citrus. In your dreams, kitchens transform into laboratories where women in aprons create sustenance that flows outward to distant battlefields. Jars of pickled vegetables march in formation like soldiers, while emergency ration bars stack themselves into protective walls around vulnerable troops. The whimsical imagery contains a core of truth. In this war, food is indeed both medicine and armour, its proper preservation as crucial as any military strategy. So next time you can't sleep because your neighbour's too loud, remember those Civil War women who turned their domestic skills toward national salvation, one pickle jar at a time. Their ingenuity in preserving food during America's darkest hour ensured that armies could march, fight, and ultimately reunite a fractured nation. And that, perhaps, is something worth remembering when modern inconveniences seem overwhelming, how ordinary skills applied with extraordinary purpose can sustain us through our most challenging hours.